What do you think overall is your magic then?
I think the magic is being able to understand how to spark emotional responses in people who are inside physical space. So I think that the live situation of being inside a space is something that we do very well, and that we can understand those stories and understand how just like a beam of light, something really simple which comes over and can just be like a very small thing, can affect somebody in such a way that they feel something, and understanding how to do that in time. So at what point in time, or at what point during a show or during a time period, do certain things have to happen in order to feel certain ways, which is in the end just storytelling. It's how do you tell the story for people to be triggered.
Welcome to Magic Academy podcast. Today with us is Leigh. She has been on the forefront leading the design immersive experiences since 2019. It's been a long journey, and she has always been exploring how technology and immersive experiences can potentially awaken our human emotions and in a very visceral and embodied way. So the topic that we're going to explore today will be focusing mostly on the immersive experience design and how we can, or what are some basic strategies we can implement in that environment to trigger emotions, and especially as we develop leadership programs and other learning development programs. Happy and so grateful to have you, Leigh, to join us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Coming here at you from Berlin, Germany. So it's great how we can use technology to connect in this way and feel close to each other, even though we're actually quite far away.
Exactly. I feel as if we're just together. And I think in the future, if we have the immersive space, we can potentially just sit together and then have this conversation moving forward. That would be perfect. I do have, as before we start, I do have a question. Just close your eyes, and in front of you lands a spaceship, and out walks a very friendly alien. Friendly, for sure. If you were to use one word, one sound, or one movement to introduce yourself, what would that be?
Hi, I'm the alien Leigh, and I'm here to help you feel your emotions through storytelling.
I love it. Beautiful, beautiful. So why immersive experiences?
Yeah, it's nice to see everyone here, and thanks for inviting me to have a chat. So I started working in this field after studying architecture in Glasgow, Scotland, where I come from originally. And then I moved to Berlin, which just sounded like a good time, or a good place to be at the time in the mid-90s. And I started working with the art, heavily in the art scene and in the music scene, especially around electronic music in Berlin. And we were designing spaces, and those spaces were sometimes used for temporary events and temporary art happenings and clubs and stuff. And like we were looking for like materials which and technologies which could help us design something which went up very quick and went down just as quick as it went up. Sometimes some of those spaces were, some of those parties and events were not legal in the same way that they are now. And so we had to get in and out of these buildings really quickly and through. Back then, even though you talk about film projectors or the very first video projectors, then it seemed to be a good idea to work with technology and light to create these spaces and to completely transform something, a place, a live place where people and humans are physically in it. And these are actually the first immersive experiences. Or maybe you go right back to, I don't know, like hundreds of years ago when people are meeting in the courtyard or some kind of market or around the campfire or whatever those rituals were at the time. I do believe that these are all immersive experiences, and therefore in the end what I've been doing for a long time. It's just that we now name it in a different way, and we don't have to say, oh, I design interiors using temporary pieces of technology to create da 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 da, and you don't have to spin it off like that. And it's great to be able to recognize and name these spaces that we create. And I feel that, yeah, that by connecting with a community in a live space, even though it's great to be talking to you here, I'd much rather be sitting there having a coffee and actually interacting in physical space together. And therefore, yeah, just started creating these different types of pieces and works and experiences for people to go to and to enjoy together in groups and in their community.
That's beautiful. How would you define the immersive one? Does immersive means the environment is like immediate around you that triggers like maybe embodied experience? Like how do you define that immersiveness?
Yeah, I think for me, like this word is being used and it's very trendy to talk about immersive. And there's many, many different levels of those types of experiences, the same as you have so many different formats from films to series to short films to whatever. But in my particular field, I think I would describe our immersive experience as multi-sensoric. So I think there has to be more than just triggering one sense like sight or hearing or taste or smell. I think it has to work it with the combination of being immersed in something. And I don't think that it's possible to really be immersed if it's only one triggering one of your sensory organs. Yeah, I would say for us, it's a multi-sensoric experience, which triggers you more because you're inside it. So it's happening around you. You are surrounded by this experience, and therefore it is immersive.
And we can talk about emotion, and we wanted to tap into some stories to talk about the power of emotion and stories in the immersive environment. So you have launched many successful immersive multi-sensory experiences. Out of all that, what was one of the maybe a few memorable experiences that you witnessed that people came into this experience feeling transformed by the time they walked out of the experience?
That's a good question. I think for us, or for me as a designer, the best moment is when you go into the space and you hand it over to the visitor and to the patrons and the people that you've actually made it for. So we do spend like anything from a couple of months to a couple of weeks inside one of those spaces before we actually open it. And this moment of actually opening it and then just sitting back and watching how people respond. And it's always quite different to what you thought. So that I always find very positive, because you have an idea of how other people are going to respond to the work. But until it actually happens, there are so many other levels and so many things that happen that you didn't think about before. And it's always just really fun to be then the observer. There's a few things. I don't think I could pinpoint one particular moment, but recently, for example, we have an immersive experience opened at the moment in Australia. And I recently received a message from somebody who had taken their child into this experience, and the child had some learning difficulties, I believe. And the parents had sent me a letter, or sent us a letter to the studio saying how amazing the experience was for the child and for them as parents. And of course, like when you receive something like that, then it's just one person, but it makes sense, and it's like it's worth it, of course, because it's a very emotional message. But there's also just been really fun things that you see. We would normally watch the shows before leaving for 10 or 20 times to understand and to learn and to improve and to watch people. And yeah, it's always fun when you realize that somebody is quite skeptical, maybe coming in, and they're not really sure what to expect. They've maybe never been in a space. All of our experiences are also interactive, so you can actually co-create those environments yourself. And so they're a little bit like standoffish, maybe in the beginning, and to observe the progress of how they relax and become comfortable with the technology. And in the end, like maybe if it's somebody who's a little older and maybe not used to those types of spaces, to watch them break down their barriers and just release the inner child in themselves. And so things like that are always really rewarding to observe.
What does that look like when people release their inner child in the whole immersive experience?
I think, like, for me, it's really about being able to forget and shut out everything else which was going on in your life up until that point, and to just be able to be in that moment and to enjoy it without having any inhibitions or fear about, I don't know, whatever it was that individual person was reacting to. So you can see just how people relax and respond and have fun and enjoy and get excited about things that they, especially in interactive environments, that they create and build themselves in space. And yeah, obviously there's some feedback and stuff and different ways of collecting feedback. I think these days through technology as an enabler to do certain things that you couldn't do maybe if you go back to 20 years ago when I first started. I think it's great because you can actually track and prove and validate that those types of experiences and a lot of these types of, in our case, very optimistic, very free, open experiences which are there to spark curiosity in people and not to like preach or not to teach them through enjoyment and through having fun. Because if you go back to, I don't know, like the classroom, or just you look at education and you look at learning systems and all of those things, if you can find ways for people to be involved through having fun and not realizing that you're actually learning whilst you're doing it, then you have the jackpot in terms of
Yes.
enabling these types of learning spaces. So yeah, it's great for us if those things start to happen. Then I think those spaces are successful.
Wonderful. So I would safely assume that the strategies of making that immersive, explorative learning spaces happen will bring in the immersiveness in elements such as like the multimodal, multisensory perspective. It will also bring in the story piece. That's where kind of it triggers people's connections to emotions. And I'm just assuming because you're the one who's really exploring it. Oh, if you were to complete that, leveraging all the immersive technology such as artificial intelligence and maybe bio-neural feedback, what would that be? How would that? We can maybe sketch it as we.
Yeah, I think like one thing that I've been focused on is like how to create optimistic spaces and how to create things which help people understand that technology is there to be assistant and not to take over your life. And I think that especially now when it comes to like artificial and AI and all this stuff, that a lot of people maybe are not artists or designers or scientists and don't understand the way that they can integrate or use these technologies in order to actually save time or to actually, yeah, that it's nothing that you need to be scared of. In certain ways, I guess there are, and I understand a lot of fears connected to technology, of course. But in the end, like, we can show and we can use and we can help people become more comfortable around these types of new technologies and embrace them a little bit better rather than being afraid of them. And for example, we would use emotional content and storytelling, because if you have a narrative and if you tell a story, it's so much more valuable to triggering, and you can prove already that those emotional and emotions that you feel as a person, that these will be triggered in a stronger way. And therefore things like community, dealing with the problem of loneliness, dealing with all of these issues that people feel, especially after a global pandemic, and all these things that we're going through in our lives. And on a different scale, some people more this, other people this. I live in Europe. We have different fears than what's happening in the US, but whatever. But it's complicated. The world is complicated. And I think that we can help through creating stories to touch people in emotional ways that they might not have been connected to before. All of those feelings and emotions are and thoughts are there anyway. These are not things that
Yes.
it's just helping people to control and to understand and to move forward in this complicated world that we live in. And I think that these types of environments can enable people to understand things in a different way. So it's a great addition, entertainment, educational addition to lots of other formats that are also spectacular, like film or like music, or many things can help us. But in particular, I think we can touch and we can trigger people in new ways.
I love that. And I think in one of the most recent shows that you've developed, it's about climate challenge, and you implemented a challenge within kind of the experience, and asked people to take on the responsibility and start to explore. Can you delve deeper into like what the storyline, how did people respond to that particular storyline? And the climate change is real, as we were just talking about. So I think that's kind of a good example for us to anchor a little bit.
Yeah, I guess you're talking about, there's a couple of things. We have a few projects which work in the direction of climate and the crisis that we find ourselves in globally. But I think you talk about, in particular, the Revolution Earth project.
Yes.
And this is a project which was built for a science museum in the Netherlands. So really the challenge was, in the end, how do we bring children, teenagers, younger people who are still in school, more or less, even though there are families and there are parents and grandparents and stuff. But the focus was from 12 to 18. How do we bring these complicated problems that we have in the world closer to people so they understand through triggering emotions and thinking about situations that they might be forced to face in the future connected to this issue. And in the end, it's just the same thing as what I was saying before. It's like storytelling. It's a combination of storytelling and co-creation. So you arrive at the space and you're greeted on film, which is a shoot. So a film production shoot, and you're greeted by 3 kids, and they're from the future, and they tell you about the world that they live in now. So they're like from whatever, 80 years in the future, 60 years in the future, the not too distant future. And they talk about how they've heard and how they've read and heard rumors that there used to be things like nature or water. And they talk about how they've never seen a tree, for example, or they've never seen a lake. And they have to go on a journey with the rest of the participants to do certain things with inside an immersive space. So using gamification to solve different problems and to reconstruct the world the way it could have been, and to pick up rubbish and to just look at different landscapes. And all of these things happen inside an immersive room. And whilst they're continuing on their journey and fulfilling some of these tasks, there's a tree in the center of the space which is lightening up. So it lights up the more they achieve and the more they go through and the more they understand what they have to do to reconstruct the world the way it used to be able to see nature or to see water or to experience a tree or to experience a season changing or leaves changing color or whatever. The tree lights up until it's complete. And then there's like an explosion in the room of joy, and the tree has these different types of effects in it. And that's the completion of the immersive space. And after that, we take them into a third space, which is about reflection. So I think when it comes to, not for all formats, but when it comes to certain topics like this one and educational topics which are focused on classrooms and learning, then I think you also have to give that moment to reflect on what it is that you've just experienced, because the best immersive experiences are the ones where you don't think about it while you're in it. You're just living in the moment. You're only playing, you're co-creating, you're building the environments, you're interacting, you're talking to whoever else is there, but you're in that particular moment. And so the reflection space is really just about being able to reflect on what those topics were and being able to like think a bit about some call to actions that you might possibly take. In the end, I think when it comes to the topic of the climate crisis, a lot of people feel quite helpless because they feel like it's such a big theme and the world to save the planet is what can I do sitting here in Berlin to save the planet? And so they give up because they think that they can't make a difference. So I think it's really important to like take the problems down and break them down into smaller pieces, and for people to understand that every single dot and everything counts and is part of something bigger. And I think that this is quite good to do this, or the immersive experience or these environments help us deliver that message as well.
I love that. And I'm very curious, like when you were like 11 years old, back in the times, what did Leigh enjoy creating and playing that time disappeared for you?
When I was 11, I enjoyed lying in my bed trying to get an out of body experience. So I would lie in my bed and try and fly and try and go to places in my brain or in my consciousness that you wouldn't actually be able to achieve. And I thought it was fun to try and imagine these different types of spaces. And apart from that, I was really into listening to music and writing down all the lyrics. So I would do stuff like that when I was 11. And I think when I got to 15, I think when I was 11, I wasn't like always drawing or always painting or always being creative, or I wasn't one of those kids. I think when I got to 15, I started to think about architecture and physical spaces. And then I went on to study architecture, but in an art school. So more how to deal with problems and how to solve them, and not necessarily how to build a structure which remains standing for 50 years or 100 years. But
So
when
that's
I
where
was
the
11, there was no mobile phone. We had 4 stations on the TV, and you had to be home at 7 o'clock if you wanted to watch your show. And of course, we did at some point get a VCR. So you would record something and then you would play it back. But I never grew up in a technological on demand environment, outside a lot and reading books and doing these really boring things.
I think that's where the real fun is, like the nature that kind of encourages you to go beyond the limitations of technology and go into the kind of the outer domains or disciplines that kind of help you to inspire the development process, drawing inspirations from all over. Love that.
Yeah, I was reading an article, like I think yesterday or the day before, about a festival. I think it was in Scandinavia somewhere, maybe it was in Denmark, where they literally like just took away all the phones. So it was a mobile phone free festival or free experience. And they were measuring like how people, what other things, how did people then fill their time? And there was a lot of really positive results of like conversations or drawing or doing workshops or just doing other stuff. There are the things that we would have done it as kids, because we weren't connected, we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have all of those distractions.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, it's actually a very healthy thing. What do you think overall is your magic then?
I think the magic is being able to understand how to spark emotional responses in people who are inside physical space. So I think that the live situation of being inside a space is something that we do very well, and that we can understand those stories and understand how just like a beam of light, something really simple which comes over and can just be like a very small thing, can affect somebody in such a way that they feel something, and understanding how to do that in time. So at what point in time, or at what point during a show or during a time period, do certain things have to happen in order to feel certain ways, which is in the end just storytelling. It's how do you tell the story for people to be triggered. And I think that we do that pretty well.
Wonderful. And thank you, Leigh, for your time and your energy and your vibes. And I'm very grateful that you are able to stop by from your busy life and say hi to us. And we've learned so much from your stories. And we hope that for our folks out there, if you're interested, definitely get in touch with Leigh. Let's build some immersive, emotional, triggering, in a healthy way, experiences for you and your people. And thank you again, Leigh, for coming by, and hope all the best for you, your design projects, and your upcoming, I think the next quarter of the year.
Yeah, it's great for us as well to talk to you. We have a few things happening in the US as well, which will be opening. So I think if you look out for us for Flora Fauna Visions, you'll see us all over the place around the world. And I think that there are audiences everywhere in every country and every corner on every island who want to feel that connection and who want to feel that spirit of community, right? And we need to make sure that I feel responsible. I feel like we have a responsibility as designers to make sure that people come together and that we grow together and that we can have fun together and emerge together in the future. And if we can hold on to that, then yeah, then I think we can find magic for the future as well.
That's great. Yeah, collective magic in
Yeah.
an immersive story. I love it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Leigh.